Yeah. All right, Sarah, I've got it now. Thank you. Mhm. All right, Sarah, I've got it now. Thank you. Mhm. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? All right, I just had some weird feedback, but I think that's because the YouTube was in the background. All right, I think, okay, let me promote here. I think we're good. Let's get started. We're a couple minutes late, but we still had some people coming in, so I wanted to make sure everyone was able to get in okay. We are in a webinar format, so we have some people watching our meeting who aren't in the council, but I really want to make sure that the folks that are on the council are the ones that you are seeing here on the screen. That's really important to us. And so we will jump in. Anyone have any burning questions before we jump into our agenda today? We will get into introductions, so don't worry about that. Okay. Well, I think I know all of you, but I'm Nicole Flynn. I am the executive director at the Board of Public Ed. Thank you all for jumping into this again. Really appreciate all of you for making some time and really just joining us for this work. It's really important and just can't thank you enough for most of you. This is round two. And so really thank you for agreeing to come back. There were only a handful of folks that either said like, no, math and numeracy is not my jam, or like I just need to take a step back. But really, most of you said like, yes, this is super important, and I'm really excited to participate again. And so we're really thankful for that. I'm going to actually turn it over to Caitlin to facilitate our intros today. Caitlin is my handy sidekick in all of this. I could not do it without her. So really want to say thank you to Caitlin for supporting the Board of Public Ed in this work. It's incredibly important and we couldn't do it without her. So thanks, Caitlin.
Oh, thanks, McCall. Well, it's great to see everyone again and also mutually appreciative of the partnership and the opportunity to continue working with everyone in the Board of Public Ed. But I'm Caitlin Jensen. I'm the Executive Director of 0 to 5 Montana. We are a statewide nonpartisan early childhood organization, and we really are excited about just continuing to support efforts to expand, increase access to early care and education all across the state. And before we go through introductions, I'm just going to give a little bit of a overview on what we're hoping you can cover. But if you can just share your name, where you live, and then, any additional background about yourself or your role that you would like to share with the group. I know we do have a few new faces, so we just wanted to make sure that we were taking some time for folks to get acquainted with who's now in the group. And before we go through the list, I'm going to go in alphabetical order. I would like to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah here at 0 to 5 Montana, and Sarah's going to be providing some support assistance to the group as we move through this process. But I'll turn it over to you, Sarah, to introduce yourself.
Buddy, it's so great to be here. Your faces, but oh,
It might just be me, but there's some weird feedback. Was it just me? No, maybe not, Sarah.
oh,
There's some funny feedback. Sorry.
okay, okay. I think the policy analyst is 0 to 5 Montana. And really excited to be. I'll pass it back to Caitlin.
Sarah will work on this audio and we're pausing, but Sarah's a policy analyst and she does a lot of really great research and work. And so we're appreciative of her being here, and she'll be taking minutes and helping to support the final report process as well. All right. Well, I'm going to start going through the everyone's name. So I'll just, as soon as you're done, we'll just pop to the next person. But first on the list is Nora. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Nora Barney. I am the special education director and the curriculum, I guess, coordinator in Anaconda. I also help run the preschool program that we have in our district. We have a 3-year-old program, and then we also have the early literacy program as well. So that's kind of my role.
Thanks, Nora. All right, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Barron, the very proud superintendent of the Evergreen School District in Kalispell. We're a preschool through 8th grade district. I will say, I think our district was one of those, I didn't hear a bunch. We did all 3 aspects of early literacy this year. We did the summer jumpstart, the home-based, and the classroom-based. So excited to be invited back and finishing my 12th year in this role.
Thanks, Lori. All right, Miss Ann Penn Cox, you're next.
Hi everybody, I'm Ann Penn. I think I know most people, but I go by both names. I'm a weird Southern double name. I'm here in Livingston. I'm the student services director, and then I also am the district early childhood liaison. So I participate in our Park County Early Childhood Coalition actively. Similar to Nora, very similar role. We have a 3-year-old program for identified students, and then we also run 2 classrooms of early literacy program. And we're just excited to engage in some conversations about increasing math proficiency here in Livingston. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ann. All right, Karen Flipovich, you're next.
Hi, I'm Karen Filipovich, Montana Head Start Association. I'm really excited to see how targeted literacy has been unfolding. We as Head Starts have done everything from partnerships in schools to coordinating, getting the right kids in the right place that suits parent choice. So I'm excited to be back, and I'm actually at the Early Childhood Tribal Language Summit right now. So I'm excited about all of our early literacy efforts.
Thanks, Karen. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm excited to be there too. All right, Colette, you're next.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It still feels like morning to me because I've been bogged down in data all morning. I'm like, it is lunchtime. I'm Colette and I'm the administrator for the early childhood program in Great Falls Public Schools. And I've been working for the school district for 25 years and in this program specifically for 15. And we have approximately 150 students enrolled right now in our early childhood program. And about 62 of them children have IEPs. So we are a unified champion school and just wholeheartedly embrace all children learning together. So I'm excited that we're adding some numeracy to this. Good stuff. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Colette. Glad you can take a little break from data work this morning too. All right, Marissa Graybill.
Hi, I'm Marissa Graybill. I'm here in Helena, and I previously was a math teacher and instructional coach. I also worked at the Office of Public Instruction as the math coordinator for the state, and most recently worked for an education nonprofit that reviews curriculum for high quality measures, and that's expanding to the early education space as well. So I'm excited to be here and learn along.
Thanks, Marissa. We're so happy that you're joining the group. All right, Marie, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marie Judish, Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning at OPI. I've been with OPI for 2 years, and before I was a P3 principal for 7 years, started many years ago as a math interventionist, so I'm really glad to see this coming into play here.
Thanks, Marie. Christine.
Hi, everyone. Christine Lux. I'm an associate professor of early childhood education at Montana State University. I also co-lead our Montana Early Childhood Higher Ed Consortium. Let's see, I'm very involved in our Bozeman Reads program, which is our summer jumpstart and our classroom-based intervention for 4s. And I have to say that I'm so delighted to be part of this next group that honors play and learning that happens before kindergarten by including both language literacy and everyday math. Also really excited about the conversations around how strengths that children have in one area may be areas of challenge in others. So I'm excited to see how this legislation has moved forward and our collective role in helping to make sure it's implemented effectively. So great to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. Turn it over to Lance.
Hi, you guys. I'm Lance Melton. I've been with MTSBA for 30 years, and I've been the executive director for the last 25. I definitely pushed the envelope on behalf of MTSBA for several years in terms of trying to expand access to early childhood education through the exceptional circumstances, and feel like that actually pushed the envelope enough that they came and did something right. We collaborated in developing the original legislation in House Bill 352 with Representative Barker, and I'm grateful to be among such a great group of leaders here, and anxious to help out in any way that we can.
Thanks, Lance. All right, turning over to another new member, Representative Melissa Nikolakakos.
Hi, Melissa Nikolakakos. Live just outside of Great Falls. I have my P3 degree from Dillon, and I've been working at Centerville K-12 school, EK through 12 school, outside of Great Falls for the past 8 years, substitute teaching, and I've got 4 kids. That's kind of what started my early childhood career, was babies. I also have did classes and stuff outside of Livingston for Montessori, from the one that was, this was 20 years ago when I took it, but it was actually one of the ladies who actually worked under Marie Montessori herself. She was rather old, but very informative. Do kind of love that area of early childhood.
Thank you. All right, next on the list is Stephanie Olson. Doesn't look like she's on. So we'll go to Doug.
Good afternoon, everybody. Doug Reisick. I'm the executive director of the Montana Quality Education Coalition. For 22 years before that, I was the superintendent at Hellgate Elementary. And obviously, early childhood education is extremely important to me, and it's right where it needs to be. So thank you for letting me participate.
Thanks, Doug. Okay, another new member, Representative Melissa Romano.
Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Romano. I live in Helena and I'm proud to represent House District 80. I have been involved in mathematics at the elementary level for about 21 years, as long as I have been a classroom educator, and numeracy has always been important to me. So I was excited to bring a bill and shine a light on early numeracy. I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to lots of learning and good conversation.
Thank you. All right, we also have on our list Doug Rosberg and Nicole Simonson, but we're going to go ahead and skip down to Dr. Allison Wilson.
Thanks, Caitlin. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Wilson. I'm an early childhood associate professor at the University of Montana. I also direct our Institute for Early Childhood Education, which has a mission of research, model demonstration, and community outreach. Happy to be a part of this group. A big part of our institute and work includes our lab school as a model demonstration site that does a lot of technical assistance for programs and communities across the state, and was really integral in uplifting this past year's 9 early literacy classrooms in Missoula County Public Schools, and a number of y'all on this call are members of our advisory council. So really excited to be a part of this, and yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Allison. Great. Thanks, everyone, for taking some time for introductions. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure we'll all get to know each other more as the process moves along. I'm going to turn it back over to McCall to move us through the next parts of our agenda.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Before I jump in, I do want to recognize Katie Bloodgood, who's on here today. Katie is the Superintendent Hedelin's legislative liaison. Obviously did a lot of work during the legislature, and just wanted to recognize her being on today. So thanks, Katie. All right, so let's jump into the next piece here. Really wanted to review the purpose and timeline, sort of some housekeeping stuff too. I think that it's really important for us to review. In 2023, The Board of Public Ed formally created the Early Literacy Advisory Council. So that means that they took a formal vote to create you all from a legislative or a statutory law that allows them to do so. Obviously, since I did that in September 2023, that is still relevant for 2 years. It didn't seem to make sense to me to create another advisory council with relatively the same people to do some of this similar work in the same statute. So I thought it just made sense to work under the same group of people, that same council. So we're just sort of changing it up a little bit. Like I said at the beginning, we've got a lot of the same folks here. So what we're really doing is you'll see in your packet that the Early Literacy Advisory Council document that's in there really is the document that we send to the Secretary of State and the Governor's Office for formalities. That has sort of your bios and the relevant information that we have to submit. That information is from 2023. And so if you'd like to update that, and I know I don't have information for a couple of you, so if you'd like to update that or provide me additional information, please get that to me by Friday. I will submit that to the Governor's Office and the Secretary of State on Monday. So just want to give you an opportunity if you'd like to change any of that. So in the 2025 legislative session, obviously the same early literacy targeted intervention statute was revised. It included numeracy and math. I know many of you know this. You're up to date on a lot of this work. And given that you all worked on that statute, again, it made sense to us that we just bring the same group together. We really didn't want to sort of create the same wheel over again. It made no sense to us. I do want to remind you, though, that because this is a formal advisory council created by the board, that all of our meetings are recorded. We are open to the public. We are streaming live to YouTube. They are accounted for through formal meeting minutes. So just wanted to make sure that that is the case. You should also know that if you are to meet in Helena in person, you are also allowed compensation through the state, and we will do that for you if necessary. So just wanted to make sure that you had all of that information before, obviously, we move forward with this work. It's important that you all know sort of what you're getting into. I think most of you know that, but obviously a reminder is important. So I think at this time, maybe I'll turn it back to Caitlin to get into item number 3. Obviously, I think there are some things here that we're waiting on a little bit. The timeline of the work is obviously a little bit bound by action on House Bill 628. I think there's some work that we still can do around the evaluation methodologies, but we'll get into that a little bit in this next section. So Caitlin, go ahead.
All right, thanks, McCall. Okay, so what we're hoping to do is just spend a little bit of time going through House Bill 338, which, as McCall and Lance also brought up, really builds off of the legislation that was passed last session by Representative Brad Barker, 352. But before we get into it, I would like to invite Representative Romano to help guide us through and maybe speak to some of the key elements and what you're hoping, and just in terms of your general goals and any key aspects of the legislation that you'd like to highlight for the group. And then I know with Representative Melissa Nikolakakos also on here, and McCall just mentioned too, that as we're waiting for House Bill 628, that at least for the time now, we're going to kind of focus on 338. And then once we have more information, then we'll do another kind of deep dive into any other aspects around 628 that would become relevant if we have that signature. So after you speak, Representative Romano, I'll turn it over to Representative Nikolakakos if there's anything else that you just wanted to highlight about 628. But for the purposes of today, we'll just do a little bit more of a walkthrough for on 338. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so House Bill 338 is mirrored after Representative Barker's bill around early literacy intervention, in the sense that this now allows districts to screen and provide intervention for early numeracy as well. And it still maintains the three different components of in classroom, at home, and then Jumpstart as well. And so ideally, it would be great for this, just like you did with literacy, to look at numeracy and come up with appropriate evaluation methods for districts to identify benchmarks or targets, and how to evaluate that so students are proficient in numeracy. And just like the early literacy, in the bill, numeracy it's that third grade level as well. And so it's stating that by third grade, we want students to be proficient in numeracy, which is why it's mirrored just after Brad Barker's the early literacy intervention. Trying to think if I've forgotten anything. If I have, I'm sure Caitlin will tell me.
I think those are great. Those are great key highlights. And I was just I know everybody hopefully has the bill available, but if you go onto the attachment after the agenda, you'll see the full bill. And I'll maybe reiterate that as you go, you kind of have to go through.
I can share my screen, Caitlin, if you want.
Okay, that'd be perfect. Thanks, McCall. And maybe just skip down to is it page 19? Yeah, it's kind of where it gets started. There's a lot of just like kind of basic changes, just some cleanup language to remove like some of the reading literacy and kind of transition it into a early intervention program that encompasses both literacy and numeracy. And then I would say too, I mean, just as Representative Romano said, I mean, it really does, it keeps all the three interventions. So I'll let McCall kind of, skim down a little bit more. But as you'll see, okay, yep. So then kind of keep going. We have some definitions. So page 21 at the bottom. Yeah, you'll see okay, yeah, there we go. So legislative intent. So you'll see that there's just some additions to add math in addition to reading. And then if you scroll down a little bit more, so then at the bottom of 21, there's some cleanup.
And Caitlin, I think it's also important to know that this also changes the name to early targeted intervention. And I think that's one thing that we see as a difference between this bill and House Bill 628 is there is a very different name of the two and naming of the two. And that's why I think getting into sort of, which bill will prevail, I guess, and how we move forward with like rules is a big change. And that's why we're not moving forward with any of that right now.
Yes, thanks, McCall. Yeah, and feel free to jump in at any point if I forget anything. And then you'll see at the top of this page that it changes instead of determine an evaluation methodology, it's evaluation methodologies. I think that was also something that was really clear when we went through the process the last time, is that we need to make sure that we are keeping this open to support local control. All right, Lance, I see your hands up. Would you like to comment?
Earlier in here, I've kind of tried to cross compare these bills. And one key distinction that I see that I think could be pretty significant, but there has been even some ambiguity in administrative interpretations. But House Bill 338 on page 22, you'll see that in subsection 4, a deliberate removal of reference to particular months. Mm-hmm. And that means immediate evaluation and immediate enrollment year round. And House Bill 628, on the other hand, provides for evaluation no sooner than 5 months prior to enrollment. So those are that's a pretty big key distinction there. I just also want to bring to your attention that in the existing law, we were asked, can we do an evaluation outside of those months? And we said, no. Those months are the specified months. Therefore, that's the extension and the limitation of your authority But within OPI, there were sort of discordant voices. Some, depending upon who you spoke to, some would say, yeah, that's right. And others would say, no, you can do the evaluation whenever you wish. If we're going to take the position as a task force in making recommendations here, one of them that we should confront is, depending upon which of these bills eventually becomes law, that we need to either incorporate an administrative interpretation that a student who pops up, moves to the community in December, is in sore need of and is qualified for enrollment, can be enrolled or must wait. We need to resolve that at some point, because in a conflicting interpretation, it's just somebody waiting to claim A and B and then have it pulled back. And if they built their entire operating model on the basis of that A and B that's projected, and then all of a sudden they've got 5 kids that they thought they had $6,500 a piece for that they got zip, that's going to be a significant issue. Again, I know that we're letting the dust settle on which of these bills takes precedence, but that's one of the key areas that jumps out at me. Sorry for the interruption there.
No, it's all good. Yeah. And 338 has been signed. We're still waiting to hear, but Melissa, I see that Nicola Kakos, your hand's up. So would you like to say something?
So the no sooner was supposed to be kind of in line with this. And so that, at least for legislative intent, was so that way, if kids did come in the middle of the school year, they could get evaluated and put in right then and there. The no sooner intent was, we didn't want kids being tested, say, the October before they started EK. So that was the no sooner than 5 months was supposed to, at least that was my intent to coordinate with this bill. We did really want to coordinate the 2 bills together as much as possible.
But Lance, I like your idea of sort of trying to come to terms of how we provide a recommendation, because I do think that when we left last year, there was a lot of questions around what happens. And I know that this council also had a lot of questions around what happens. I think actually, Nora, I think it was you that brought up, like, well, what do we do in July? Like, what happens if a kid comes to us in September? And so I think that is something that I think this council should sort of play with some scenarios and come up with some recommendations, whether it be, to the board or just generally to school districts.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's really helpful, and we should document that the sponsor's intent, because you guys, I mean, we all know that if 628 is signed by the governor, then 338 is voided. And so we're under 628. If it's not signed, then we're under 338. So if 628 becomes law, then it's very helpful for me to hear from Representative Nicola Kakos that there's no intent to say you evaluated them in January and therefore you can't enroll them for at least 5 more months. The no sooner than, as opposed to an administrative interpretation that what we were seeking to do was to increase the flexibility on timing. Now, on Representative Romano's bill, I think it's crystal clear. The sponsor deliberately removed those references in order to allow evaluation to take place pursuant to local control with no sideboards as to timing at all. But I think that merits us, as part of our recommendation, would be an administrative rule to OPI or to the Board of Public Ed to incorporate and align with Representative Nicola Kakos's interpretation should that bill become the prevailing law.
And I think, Lance, we could write that in rule in a way that is easier understood by school districts.
Yeah. I know there's still a little information up in the air. So thanks for pointing that out. And really, I mean, aside from that change and the evaluation timing, and then just the addition around numeracy and math, and I mean, those are really the main components. I just wanted to highlight too that as a reminder, and for those that are new, that as we're looking at the evaluation methodologies, and we'll go through the rubric later on, but just to make sure that it has to be developmentally appropriate, research-based, cost-effective, and if possible, aligned with the formative assessments that inform instruction in the classroom-based program and the Jumpstart program. And so just as a reminder, last time we took some initial time to understand what types of assessments and screenings were already taking place, and also clarified that, that this is local control and that we want to make sure that that what you're doing can work, and that we have to just have the rubric and the understanding that these methodologies must be met. Christine, I see your hands up.
I just wanted to say something else about the that timeline of eval, since we dove right in. Lance, we can always count on you to dive right in, which I think is really important, because I think our timeline's likely going to be short for this process as well. But I went back to the language of the rule, and it was that the evaluation methodology may be administered. And I remember we use that word because it may be, but doesn't have to be. And I think our concern was we didn't want 3-year-olds too early to be screened and considered eligible. So I just wanted to, if that language, the may, without the requirement of, I wanted to just point that out there, because that was our way of saying it could happen here, but it also may happen in other places. So I just wanted to be sure that that was my understanding going into that and recalling those conversations, but that interpretation could be quite different, which I think is what we're pointing out and talking about today.
Yeah, the bill drafting manual would say that may is both an extension and a limitation on authority. So I think under Barker's bill, we're toast. Even in the face of a friendly interpretation, if someday someone were to challenge that, there's both case law and literally parts of the bill drafting manual that say that when you want to allow somebody to do something but not require them to, you say may. So what it says in the absence of you may in April, May, or June is it does not say you may in any other month. So there's an explicit extension of authority and an implied limitation. And I see that both of these bills improve on that. And Representative Romano's bill improves upon it by deliberately removing those months as a restriction. And so we're good to go. And Representative Nikolakakis's bill does it by having sort of a conjoined alternative that we need to tease out in the rules, where it says no more than 5 months prior to or upon, right? That basically says upon. You can evaluate upon enrollment. But that beginning part that says in the alternative, no sooner than 5 months or upon enrollment, we need to just definitively identify in alignment with the sponsor's intent and with a friendly reading of that language that also allows an instantaneous evaluation and a concurrent enrollment. And I think that's what Representative Nikolakakis has said was her intent.
I really appreciate how you guys just dive right in. And this is really important that we're talking about it and just clarifying, because it is confusing, and just to understand what's different in the bills. I'm going to try to move us along, but Lori, I would like to hear from you.
I know, you're going to regret inviting some of us back. I do want to make sure, we don't have to talk about it right now. I don't have it right in front of me, but when I think about accreditation, because I'm locked into that group as well, our limit is 10 up to 18 with a paraprofessional. In traditional classes, for example, first grade, you got 20, but if you go over with a qualified adult, you have an hour and a half with another adult per kid you're over. If we're doing this and we have to enroll year round, is the same thing going to apply with a class with 11? Would only have to have an hour and a half, or you got to go a full paraprofessional? If you go to 19, can you just have another paraprofessional for an hour and a half, or you have to have an entirely new section and there's no way to go over 18 ever? So I just think I hesitate because this program's not required, and I don't want us to put in so many stipulations where districts choose not to operate it because it's so financially impossible to hold if you have to hire someone, a whole other class or paraprofessional, if you hit 19 and you can't do the hour and a half if you're just one kid over. So something for us just to throw on the list to talk about later when we come to, if you're testing all year, you're admitting all year, and you can't be guaranteed into that locked in class size. So just something to remember.
Yeah, Lori, I think when we get to the rule for the early childhood education standards in Chapter 63, we can definitely look at that. Lance and I actually were talking about that language earlier in the year. there's definitely some wiggle room to that. But I think it's a little complicated to understand. So we can maybe talk about clarifying that a bit. I do want to be really thoughtful about not going too far around changing the ratios, but because I think Christine and Allison will maybe regret going back together. But I do think that maybe cleaning up the language, clarifying, making it a little bit more understandable would definitely be worth reviewing that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of highlight a couple other things, but just so that as a reminder, what we're really going to be focusing in on is as mentioned before, there's 3 interventions. There's the home base, there's the classroom base, and the summer jumpstart, and we're really going to be focusing in on the both the classroom based and the summer jumpstart in terms of looking at the different methodologies. But just as a reminder that the new language does apply to all of the interventions that are listed within the bill. So I don't know if there's anything else that McCall you wanted to highlight, but I know we have a lot more to cover too. So, or if there's anything else that sticks out to folks on the bill that they want to mention. And Lori,
No, thanks. Oh yeah, Lance, go ahead.
I've got one more. I just think that they're both, there was a legislative awareness and an acceptance that I don't think we need to be so hyper aware of that. You can't touch anything other than literacy the way we had to the first time around. I think that there's been some give there, and I think it's reflected in both bills. And I think that's going to help us a bit, because remember how stilted that conversation became? And I still can't remember which one of you said it, but it just hit me right between the eyes when you said, how am I supposed to avoid numeracy when I say turn to page 10 and they say, what's 10? So I like that both of these bills give us a bit of freedom in terms of the task force recommendations about what those standards are under early childhood education. And I think that's going to be something exciting to tackle as part of this process.
Lance, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one thing Caitlin and I were talking about, was like, this is something that this group grappled with last time, and it seemed really obvious to us. And so I think it's going to be probably a much easier integration than we probably thought. I also think one thing for us to keep in mind as you look at the language in the bill is it says literacy or numeracy. I think we need to keep that in mind as we think about the evaluation methodologies. Right? We're not asking schools to do both reading and math, literacy and numeracy. So we should be thinking about how we set that up and with an or instead of an and. That's just been something in my mind, and want to maybe put that in your minds as well as we continue talking about this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, especially with the screener. And then I know that there's been some more progress too, just on the Montana Early Learning Standards. And I think that key frame too around developmentally appropriate. It's like we know for 4-year-olds that we really have to think holistically about how children learn at that age and learn through play and discovery and interactions. And so it's like we can have all these, other parts to it. And both bills do a great job of and we're just so thankful of just really opening up the opportunities that kids and schools and parents can have when it comes to early intervention. So, all right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to McCall. Right? No, am I doing? No, this is you.
You're doing this one.
Oh my gosh.
The scope of work.
Hold on. Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, this is pretty straightforward. Sorry. I feel like I'm talking way too much. Okay, I'm just gonna briefly go through what our advisory council scope of work is. So as a reminder, this is pretty similar to what we did the first round around early literacy, but the hope and our goal is to recommend an evaluation methodology that will be used to determine whether a child is at, above, or below the developmental trajectory leading to math proficiency at the completion of 3rd grade. So that's really what the charge is from the legislation. It's what we are charged as an advisory. Part of our other list of our scope of work is to create a screening tool crosswalk. So we'll show you the visuals and remind you of what we did this last round when we meet again, but we're hoping to use that similar type of format of that crosswalk to update around math and numeracy And then we're going to be updating ARM 1054-901, which is the evaluation methodology for early literacy targeted interventions, as well as 1054-902, which is the Jumpstart program framework for early literacy targeted intervention. And then we will also be updating Title 10, Chapter 63, the Early Childhood Education Standards. So once we go through the crosswalk and those pieces of the methodology, then we'll be diving more so into rule. And that will be it. So I'm going to turn it over now to McCall.
Thanks, Caitlin. I'm going to actually show you guys. We're going to jump to the next one, which is the item 5 evaluation methodology. I'm going to actually show you guys what the final version was for literacy. And I think that'll help you kind of get an idea of sort of the format and the template and where we think we were going to go for math. And I think we need to be thinking about how we want to set this up for numeracy. And so let me just share my screen. All right. So this is the administrative rule website. We are in chapter 54, which says general provisions. This is where we put all the early literacy stuff. We're in 901 is where our interventions are. So this is the rule that you all created last time, which I think is actually very exciting. This is the rule that was created that has all of the early literacy skills that were really based off of the science of reading. And I think that that is really important because as you look at this, if you remember, because of the April, May, or June language in the bill, we really had to think about skills that had to be assessed prior to the grade level by which students would be going into, right? So we said 4-year-olds, prior to kindergarten, prior to first grade. And so I think we need to keep that in mind as we move into, depending on what the language of the bill looks like, how we want to set this up for the future. Do we want to keep the prior language? Is that easily understood for school districts and those who will be assessing children? Making sure that it is easily understood and common understanding for those who will be doing the assessing. So making sure that this, again, format can be maintained for whatever we do for math and numeracy. And then again, I think it's really important to still point out this sort of secondary section down here. Caitlin kind of brought this up at the beginning, but I think it's really important to point it out again. There was language in the bill that talked about screening tools, right? There was an assumption, I think, by the legislature that the Board of Public Ed was going to pick one assessment that all school districts would be using to assess children, but there was no funding appropriated to do that. And so what we decided as a Early Literacy Advisory Council was that we would recommend to the Board of Public Ed to create a list of approved evaluation methodology screening tools. This would be a list of high quality assessments that we knew did a really good job of assessing children and would be really good tools for schools to use. But we didn't want to burden school districts by saying, you have to totally abandon everything you have. Lori can probably speak to this because she was one that could use an example of something that she was using that wouldn't have made this high quality list. And so we didn't want school districts to have to abandon what they were using, but rather they would have to justify why they chose to use that instead. And the Office of Public Instruction had to keep the list and would have to then require school districts to choose other and then provide that justification. We thought that was really important because then we could still gather that data and information of what school districts were using as far as those assessments. And then the Board of Public Ed could still maintain that information as well. We do have that list up on our website, and we do open applications every other year, if there are others that want to be added to that list. And so I think that's really important to also keep on here, because I would assume that we will want to add, you know, other assessments on this list as well. And so just want to keep this in mind, because this is sort of another sort of piece that we'll have to be thinking about. Are we going to maintain the same list, or are we going to maintain separate lists? Just keep that in mind. The evaluation methodology, I think, is very broad. So as I show you this, and then I'll show you also really quickly Jumpstart. Oh, go ahead, Lance, before I jump over.
I think it's, I just echo what you said. That we've got a very familiar process here that people are accustomed to with evaluations, for example, as well. You'll find this in the federal code. It preserves local control. It also says, hey, look, check the box. You're using one of these, you are presumed to have complied. It's a safe harbor exception, but you still allow the districts to be creative with their staff and develop their own methodologies that will meet the minimum standards of the rule. So just here is essentially what I'm saying. I really think that this is one of the ways that you thread the needle and never get into a needless dispute among local control advocates with this type of cadence in the rule.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, haven't seen any data from this yet, so it's hard to say whether it's working or not, or what type of data we're getting from it. But hopefully we'll be able to collect something soon, and we'll get some good feedback from that. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if, you know, moving forward with this, with regard to the numeracy component, and also coming out of this first year with the literacy program, what has been, or is there any intention to have a process for vetting what districts are saying that they're using, if they're not using something from the list, but they're saying that it meets the criteria in some other way? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm just wondering, like,
Totally.
how, like, can I just say, well, I made a checklist and it includes this, but like, is there some sort of evaluation of that or vetting to ensure that they are actually being intentional with development appropriate, research-based, et cetera?
Marie, can you speak to what that data collection looks like?
Yeah, we are currently in the middle of data collection for districts for the school year. And that wraps up here June 15th, I want to say, and then we'll start compiling that. Right now they're submitting other, and then they give us, some things are teacher driven, some things are dial, whatever it might be. There's not a current vetting process, as they are checking an assurance box right now. And that was based off of different feedback from our stakeholders. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Lance?
Sorry, I'm going to keep giving these technical things because that's actually where my expertise lies here. Both of these bills are effective July 1st, and using ordinary rulemaking processes, there's no way possible that you're going to have this in for several months. We are going to have this in for several months. And I'm not the one to advise you on this, McCall, but I think that it would be worth asking your counsel. And remember, you're talking about a constitutionally empowered board that has been found by the court to have independent rulemaking authority. I'm talking about using this on a very limited basis. But if you have Representative Romano's bill or Representative Nikolakakis's bill, they basically provide for instantaneous evaluation and enrollment. So do you want the kid that needs this in July to be able to get evaluated and enrolled in July? Or do we want to cool our heels for 6 months and then maybe say, well, it's just as easy to go for a full year? I would just look at the interim rulemaking process, because if I were going to do something just straight up on here, I'd bounce in here and I do an interim rule that says every place it says targeted literacy, say and numeracy rather, and then spend all of our work on identifying 5 or 6 high quality numeracy evaluation tools, stick them in here and say that's the interim rule until we come forward further with a full MAPA delayed rulemaking process. Because the fact that I think that Representative Nikolakakis's bill, I think even says effectively anyone who wants in from May 1st onward. And in the case of 338, it's definitely July 1st forward. And without the restrictions on the evaluation timeframe, the sooner the better. You might have a kid that really needs this, has never had the opportunity to be evaluated for numeracy purposes, and who needs that like right now, not next December. So,
Lance, couldn't you argue though that since it says literacy or numeracy, that they could still do this?
in the absence of rulemaking, probably not, because it says that they have to use an evaluation methodology. So that's approved as part of what we're discussing here. So essentially 1054-901 has nothing in it about numeracy. And so until we amend that rule, and if you follow the ordinary processes of MAPPA, which you know better than me, but I know it's 90 days out, you know, you contemplate a period of comment and then
Like 28, yeah.
you know, and so I just think that it's worth it for you to have a discussion, or to OPI have a discussion with Chief Counsel collaboratively together, and identify is an interim rule in order in this circumstances. And under MAPPA, you know, that they are called temporary or emergency rules. You can kind of look in there and see more about this in the code. But I really think that there's a sense of urgency here that we're gonna really miss if we don't at least contemplate. And if we conclude, you know, if council says no, you know, that can't really be done. If it were me and I were advising the Board of Public Ed, I'd say, look at the Sherlock decision, do an interim rule right now, throw in or numeracy, add in 5 safe harbor evaluation tools based upon the expertise of the people here in the room other than myself, and then vocally express to everyone that this is an interim rule designed to ensure implementation as quickly as possible, and that we're going to be following through with a rulemaking process that's going to mirror the deliberative process last time, which will then replace the interim temporary rule.
All right, I'll look into that. Thanks for that. All right, Ann Penn, I saw your hand first.
Sorry, and I know everybody's probably just got all these thoughts, and so I'm gonna dump them.
I know.
So I was just thinking last time about how we went through the process, and how we kind of had a large scale conversation about like what approach to teaching literacy did we want to adopt as a team. I would assume we're going to have that conversation, right? Because I know there are like many different approaches to mathematics instruction and early numeracy, and but just want to put that out there is like I'd love to have that conversation before, like maybe as a next step for our meeting, just before we start talking about evaluation methodology, just so I can start to wrap my head around what assessments exist within that approach.
For sure. That'd be great. And if you, Ann Penn, if you want to send me sort of a quick blurb on that, that would be great.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Nora, go ahead, and then we'll go over to Lori. You're on mute.
Thanks. You know, I guess one thing that I was thinking when Lance was talking was that, you know, I guess, are we thinking that there's going to be programs get started because we've added the math qualification? Like, I mean, I feel like the programs that have an early literacy program already, like this just allows us to accept maybe the kids that didn't qualify previously. But for our purposes, and I don't know where everyone else is at that have an early literacy program, like we're full, like we're looking at trying to have space for another classroom, because we don't have enough space right now. So I guess I'm a little, I guess I don't understand like why there's a rush, or does there have to be a rush because it goes into effect July 1st?
There's no kid in the state who's qualified for targeted numeracy. Not one.
Get that. Yeah.
Not one. Can't do it. Can't teach it. You don't have an evaluation process that is a prerequisite to you providing targeted numeracy. So if you said, well, we're already full, and we are full across the state, and we'll wait for a year to expand into targeted numeracy, you could do so. But you can't change your kids that have been evaluated as eligible for targeted literacy cannot just suddenly be taught targeted numeracy without a separate evaluation process under this bill.
So we have to test all the kids who qualified already that
They
we
didn't
did a
qualify
month
for
ago?
numeracy. They didn't qualify for numeracy.
No, but they qualified for literacy. So
And
now
you
we have
can
to test
keep-
them. But doesn't it
And you
say
can
or
keep
Lance?
teaching them. You can keep teaching them literacy.
But
There-
not
but in-
numeracy.
In the standards, we do have the application of teaching does include an integrated component.
Yeah, you can shoehorn, we can try to shoehorn right back to the developmental standards that we embraced in here and say, we'll scratch the surface until we have a real deal here. But and listen, if you don't, it's fine. You're not going to get funded for kids that have not been evaluated for purposes of targeted numeracy if you embark on teaching them targeted numeracy. And whether that's kids that are currently in there for 3 hours a day for literacy, and now you're going to add 3 hours for numeracy in a blended model, but you're going to increase the A and B. You're not going to be able to get that done without enabling rules that give you the authority to conduct the evaluation necessary to qualify the kid. This did not say now we're doing preschool, and preschool is defined as limited to targeted literacy or targeted numeracy. And if anyone qualifies for one, then you can do both. It's specific about what you can address based upon whether or not the child has been qualified for failing to meet or projected to fail to meet targets. I mean, tell me I'm wrong. Let's go read but for the most part, what we did here is we added in or numeracy or scholastic literacy. But the fact remains that the prerequisite to serving the children and generating the A and B necessary for them is based upon their qualification for being eligible for those services. So if you said, well, now that we're covering these additional topics, you might have somebody come back and say, yeah, we'll cut your A and B in half because you didn't have an evaluation on numeracy. Shouldn't have expanded that.
Lori?
Thank you. I have two thoughts. Well, I'm going to teach them page 10 regardless. So I'm going to be getting some numeracy in there so they can get to the literacy. But not my point. Jumpstart can now start before July 1. School is out for a number of our districts. It's ending this week and next week for most others. The idea that we can, if one of the 5, and I know 5 was a made up number, if one of the 5 assessments we as a group quickly pick a district and a half, I can't go by that. I mean, I've already budgeted funds. We're at the end of the year. And then it would be almost impossible to reassess every kid I've already assessed. So does that mean Jumpstart isn't available for numeracy this year minus teaching page 10 integrated? And if it's available July 1, because Jumpstart starts prior, again, approving assessments, I like the, and I don't understand this part of it, so I'm not meaning this as input for that, but I like the emergency rule. Hey, you can start doing it so that we can capture these students and provide services. But the idea that we would pick those and a district wouldn't have it, and we're budgeting funds, and when would you test them if it's just those 5? That makes me really nervous. July 1 is, less than a month away. And so it just doesn't feel realistic that we could do that. So we need to keep in mind the summer Jumpstart is allowed to start as soon as school's out. Some districts may have already started their summer Jumpstart, and that any requirement to use a specific assessment with less than 4 weeks notice is going to be quite a hindrance, and I would imagine would keep districts from implementing it this year. I do think we need the longer time period to do it well, though.
Yeah, Lori, we didn't put the assessments in rules, so I don't imagine we would do that again. And yeah, I think that the way that the implementation and applicability was written in the bills kind of put us in a really weird position, because rulemaking does take a long time. Typically, the Board of Public Ed has a 4-meeting rule about doing that, which means 8 months. We're not going to do that because we understand the urgency, but I don't know how we do this any quicker. I will look into the emergency rule and see how we can do this in a way that sort of allows school districts to do this quicker than usual. But I don't know how we do this any faster than we can, in a reasonable way that doesn't sort of, put us in a position that maybe we missed something or make any errors. So I'm also really cognizant of that. Okay. I know we are at our time, so I'm going to skip a couple things. I really do want to talk about our next meeting. I think this group last time really wanted to meet in person. You guys all really enjoyed the in-person time. We met for a full day, or at least like a 10 to 2 or 3 o'clock time. We filled it to the gills. So I really want to see where you guys are at this time. I think, given that we sort of have the template, we know where we're going, want to see what you guys are thinking. I would like to shoot for the week of the 16th. I think preferably like the 18th, the 20th could work really well. Want to see where you guys are at with that. Any thoughts?
My only request is that we do it at least the day after the 16th, because I'm gone on the 16th and I would love to meet in person.
I can't do that whole week. I can't do anything through the
OPI's
16th.
Summer
I mean,
Institute.
Yeah, there's Summer Institute. We've got this accreditation task force just slamming it, trying to get it finished. I'm gone the week of the 16th. I'm not sure about everybody else.
I'm not available those dates either.
18th, I'm teaching a class over at MSU. But other than that, I could make that week work, but it sounds like it's not going to work. What about
Yeah, that sounds like a tough time. How about I look for maybe a couple dates the following week? I'll send you guys a doodle. But it does sound like people enjoy in person, and obviously we'll always have the Zoom for folks who can't make it. I think that works really well. Obviously we'll be here in Helena. We do have a lot of Helena folks on, so selfishly that works well for us. And then I do want to open it up quick before I let folks go. If there's anything sort of pressing that you want between now and then, or anything that you think needs to be on the next agenda, but we didn't talk about, or anything that you kind of want between now and then that would really help us get going.
One thing that we talked about last time was, and we had like a survey that I think OPI maybe sent out, or maybe Dr. Lux did, about the assessments that programs were using. And I know like, I don't know if that would be possible. Like I know of a couple of them, but it would be nice to know if there's additional ones. So even if we don't do a survey, if everyone could just bring what they know is available, that might be helpful.
Yeah, good idea. I forgot about that. Caitlin, I think you worked with Sam to do that.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Nora. I've got that on my list. Nora, and Pen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious, and maybe this is like an OPI question, if there was any like current data on not just like math proficiency, but like specific skills that students are struggling in at the early years. So yeah, PK, I guess probably wouldn't have anything there, but K through 3rd, K through 4th, I'd just be really curious and would hope that our like what we decide to assess and intervene with is driven by that data. So that would be great to have if possible.
Yeah, we don't have anything K2, obviously. And then we'll have standard setting here for math, and we will have down to those test lists for each grade level on what those challenges are. And so we can much better disaggregate that data.
Marie, would you be willing to put something together for our next gathering by that time? Like the end of
Yeah,
this
we
month?
won't have standard setting done by then, though. That's not till July.
Oh. Okay, would you have some data though?
No, because we don't have standard setting done. So
that's the only kind of data that you guys have?
In terms of proficiency at 3rd grade and beyond, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
I would add your analysis with your attorney to this issue that we talked about whether you can expand scope to include numeracy, even though there has not yet been an evaluation. I'm worried about section 9 in 338 that specifically provides that you can start evaluating for numeracy as soon as OPI, as soon as the board develops a rule, and then says that districts can start teaching numeracy on or after July 1st. But that whole definition of eligible child, I think, is what's potentially going to catch us up here. And don't have me be the one who narrowly interprets this in this way. I think we need to defer to the sponsors. I'm saying that S apostrophe at the end, intent, and rely upon it. But I just tell you, I see a bit of a rub there when you have a transitional section that specifically says you can start evaluating for that purpose. For what reason would you evaluate if you can basically evaluate them only for literacy and then say, let's start teaching them everything? I think there's some intent here that there's supposed to be, you're supposed to be qualified under one or the other. And then I don't think we're going to get down to the micromanaging details of saying you have to have a separate section for targeted numeracy kids and a separate one for targeted literacy kids. But I just think that that's another thing you want to ask there, McCall, from your council to get ourselves, which I'll follow. Whatever you say, hey, we came back and we determined that such and such, and the sponsors are in agreement, then count on me to work right with you on that. But I just see that as a potential rub justifying some urgency to what we're doing here.
Lance, do you think it would be helpful to ask drafters and ledge staff as well? Because here's sort of my rub sometimes. Like, we have a new legal counsel from Agency Legal Services. They're not as legal. I mean, they do a great job, but it takes them longer sometimes. I'll ask, but I think also having another opinion might be differing, but having another opinion sometimes helps.
And for the sponsors, am I correct in my recollection that Pad drafted these? Pad McCracken?
Yeah, he drafted 338.
No, Pad just helped with the coordinating language.
Okay, so
Laura drafted mine.
So
okay, so I can ask both of them.
If 338 becomes the vehicle, Pat is like the king of the transition section. And I love that he does that. I mean, he's become very adept at incorporating transition clauses to be ever more specific about conveying legislative intent. And I'd ask him, and I think we could defer to he and to Representative Romano on what the intent there was. And maybe we're not under the gun as much as I think we are.
I'll work on that today. Thanks. Colette?
Okay, I had a really clear comment to make, and now my mind's kind of all over the place.
Sorry
Most
about
importantly, no, what I was thinking initially when I raised my hand was about the mills. I know that they are being revised right now, so it would be in our best interest to have the most current, whatever's happening with the mills right now at the table. I'm not sure what the current status is of those, but not to lose sight that that's happening right now. And additionally, Lance said, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too narrowly about this. Maybe it is okay to be doing both. I interpreted this to be that, it's kind of like an IEP. If we're in an amendment process, we're a stay put rule. And I kind of feel like we were just going to keep going with our programs as is with the literacy. And then once we felt confident about the math, to really intentionally start incorporating the math principles and the screening. But for sake of Great Falls Public Schools, I believe, we just finished our screening for literacy and literacy programs only, not in knowing where we'd be at with the math. So we are already enrolling for fall based on literacy and literacy screening. So I didn't feel like there would be this is going to be weird. How do we incorporate the math? We weren't even considering claiming the math part until all this rolled out really cleanly. So that's just from like a district standpoint. That might be it for right now.
Thanks for that. Christine.
Just remember that you can evaluate any month of the year under 338. And so a child who is on target for literacy, but not for literacy, but not for numeracy, who has never had a chance to be in, will have a chance to be in effective July 1st under the bill. So I agree with you, Colette, that for the most part, he was going to say, hey, we got our hands full with literacy. We just got done with an evaluation. We can wait for this rulemaking process to go forward, but we don't have that arcane sort of, these are the 3 months in which you may perform an evaluation. You can now perform it any month. And the sooner we make it available for somebody to use, the better for the kid who needs it.
Christine.
I just wanted to address Colette's comment about the mills. Allison and I are on our statewide team working with federal TA with the revision, so we will certainly bring that perspective. Now we've looked at benchmarks, we're looking at that alignment to OPI content standards, thinking of this much more in a developmental approach, but the mathematics piece of it is a strong part of that as well. So yeah, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, and just for the record and for our minutes, that part of the conversation about MELS as it fits in with this work will certainly be here.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for sticking around. I know that we went obviously much longer than we had anticipated, but I think there were lots of really good questions. I think there are obviously lots of questions still sort of out there because of sort of the position that we're in. Lance, I think you brought up a lot of really good points, like the transition sections, the applicability of these bills, say that like we're ready to go right now. One of them hasn't even been signed or not signed, but yet we're like in this waiting game. We're supposed to be adopting rules yesterday. And we're in this kind of like, you know, really we're not really sure where we're at right now. So thank you guys for hanging in this with us. Thank you for still moving forward. I think there's still some really good work that we can do, even though we're not, you know, entirely sure where we'll end up. I think there are still some things that we can do in the interim, and really excited to work on that with you. Caitlin, anything that you want to say before I quickly do public comment, next steps, and then we'll be done?
Just a couple really quick things. I mean, I know McCall will send out a follow-up email, so I'm sure we can look at a couple other dates and put those out to the group. I think the one other thing I heard in the conversation for next step is just that we may want to invite anyone who has some offerings around the methodology. I know last time when we were talking about literacy, we kind of settled on the science of reading and used that as the rubric protocol. I don't know the right word, but kind of something of that nature. So I guess just kind of think about that. And if it's in your wheelhouse or you know of some methodologies or strategies and would be willing to present on that so that we can identify skills, I think that'd be really helpful. But other than that, I'm just really thankful and appreciative of the sponsors on being on the call and a part of this group as well. It's very helpful, and it's just so good to see everyone. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, you all can leave, but before we end the call, we'll not take public comment. For any attending wishing to make public comment, please raise your hand now. When I call on you, I will promote you to speak. Do we have any public comment? All right, those in our attendees, I'm not seeing any hands up. So we will officially adjourn. I'll send you all a doodle poll. I'll look into some emergency rule. We obviously have some opinions. I'm going to go look at some, work with some folks on getting some more information, and we will touch base again with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks
everyone.